Imagine taking your 6-year-old child shopping on an ordinary summer afternoon. You stop for just a few minutes, long enough to browse a nearby display. When you turn around, your child is gone. No scream, no struggle, no witnesses pointing toward a kidnapper. Just silence. Within minutes, a busy department store became the center of one of the largest missing child investigations in American history. For weeks, thousands of volunteers searched. Police followed lead after lead. Television stations interrupted their regular programming. Parents across the country watched the story unfold with growing fear, wondering the same terrifying question. If this could happen in the middle of a crowded store, could it happen to any child? But what no one realized at the time was that this heartbreaking disappearance would change America forever. It would transform how police respond to missing children. It would inspire nationwide safety programs. And it would lead one grieving father to dedicate the rest of his life to hunting down criminals who believed they had gotten away with the unimaginable. This is the story of 6-year-old Adam Walsh. It was Monday, July 27th, 1981. Summer vacation was still in full swing. Adam had spent the day with his mother, Reve Walsh. Like countless families across America, they planned nothing extraordinary. Just a simple shopping trip to the Sears department store at the Hollywood Mall in Hollywood, Florida. Inside the store, Adam became fascinated by a display of Atari video games where several boys had gathered to watch and play. Reve asked him to stay there while she stepped a short distance away to look at lamps. She believed she'd only be gone for a few minutes. When she returned, Adam wasn't there. At first, she assumed he'd wandered to another aisle. She called his name. No answer. She checked nearby displays. Nothing. Within moments, the uneasy feeling every parent dreads began to take hold. Her 6-year-old son had vanished without a trace, and no one inside the store seemed to know where he had gone. The next few minutes would trigger a chain of events that would leave an entire nation searching for answers. The search begins. At first, no one inside Sears realized the situation was becoming a nightmare. Employees assumed Adam had simply wandered into another department. After all, children often drift away from their parents in large stores. Store workers began checking nearby aisles, calling his name over and over. Adam. Nothing. Reve searched the toy department again, then the clothing section, and then the checkout area. Every passing minute made the silence feel heavier. The crowded department store that had seemed so ordinary just moments before now felt impossibly large. Some shoppers joined the search, while others stood watching, hoping the little boy would suddenly appear around the next corner. But he never did. As concern turned into panic, someone finally contacted the police. Within a short time, officers arrived at the Sears store and began interviewing employees, customers, and anyone who might have seen Adam that afternoon. The first few hours of any missing child investigation are often the most critical, and investigators worked under the belief that every minute mattered. If Adam had simply wandered away, there was still hope. But if someone had taken him, every passing second meant they were getting farther away. As detectives reconstructed the timeline, one detail quickly stood out. Several boys had been gathered around the Atari video game display where Adam had been playing. According to later accounts, a security guard had broken up a disagreement among the children and asked them to leave the area. Investigators believed Adam may have left with the group, but after that, the trail simply ended. No reliable witness could say exactly where he went next, and no surveillance cameras recorded his movements. In 1981, shopping malls didn't have the extensive security systems that exist today. There were no mobile phones, no instant alerts, and no nationwide Amber Alert system. just frightened parents and a rapidly growing search. As the hours passed, volunteers began arriving from across the community. Police officers searched nearby neighborhoods. Helicopters scanned the surrounding area, and search dogs followed every lead they could find. Thousands of missing person flyers were distributed, and television stations interrupted their normal programming to broadcast Adam's photograph. His smiling face quickly became known across Florida, and then across the entire country. Every reported sighting gave the Walsh family a new reason to hope. Someone thought they'd seen Adam at a gas station. Another caller claimed he'd been spotted walking along a nearby road. Each tip sent investigators racing toward another possibility, but each time it led nowhere. As daylight faded into night, one terrifying reality became impossible to ignore. Adam Walsh had disappeared without leaving behind a single confirmed clue. For his parents, the uncertainty was almost unbearable. Somewhere, their 6-year-old son was alone, but no one knew where. Investigators were beginning to fear that this was no ordinary missing child case. They were hunting someone who had planned to leave almost nothing behind. As the first day passed, hope slowly gave way to exhaustion. Police officers worked through the night, following every lead they received, while volunteers searched parks, neighborhoods, canals, and empty fields. Every ringing telephone brought the possibility of a breakthrough, and every reported sighting reignited hope. But each one ended the same way. It wasn't Adam. By the second day, news of the disappearance had spread far beyond South Florida. Newspapers across the country carried Adam's photograph on their front pages, and television broadcasts urged anyone with information to come forward. Thousands of strangers, people who had never met the Walsh family, joined the search. Across the nation, parents hugged their own children a little tighter, and many stopped letting them play outside alone. What had begun as one family's nightmare was becoming a national story. For John and Rave Walsh, however, none of that mattered. Every hour without an answer felt endless. They believed that somewhere someone had seen their son. Someone had to know something, and they refused to stop hoping. Then, 14 days after Adam disappeared, everything changed. On August 10th, 1981, a man working near a drainage canal alongside Florida's Turnpike, close to Vero Beach, made a discovery that immediately drew investigators to the scene. The location was more than 100 miles from the Sears store where Adam had last been seen. Detectives quickly realized they were no longer searching for a missing child. They were investigating a homicide. The news devastated the Walsh family. What had begun as a desperate search for a little boy had become one of the most heartbreaking criminal investigations in the country's history. But even after that discovery, the biggest question remained unanswered. Who had taken Adam Walsh? Investigators launched one of the largest homicide investigations Florida had seen at the time. They interviewed hundreds of witnesses, reviewed thousands of tips, questioned known offenders, and traced vehicles. Yet despite the enormous effort, the case seemed to hit one dead end after another. There was no clear eyewitness who could identify the person responsible, no surveillance footage to follow, and no DNA technology capable of providing the answers investigators desperately needed. The tools available in 1981 were far more limited than they are today. Cases that might now be solved with advanced forensic science often depended instead on witness memories and physical evidence. As weeks turned into months, public attention slowly began to fade, but detectives refused to close the file. Instead, it grew thicker. Boxes of reports filled with interviews, sketches, and unanswered questions continued to pile up as the investigation stretched on for years. Somewhere within those thousands of pages was the name of a man who would eventually become the center of the case. A man who confessed, changed his story, confessed again, and left investigators wondering whether they were finally looking at the truth or another dead end. That man was Ottis Toole, But the deeper detectives looked into his story, the more complicated the case became. For more than 2 years, investigators chased countless leads. Some looked promising, but most led nowhere. Then in 1983, detectives found themselves questioning a man whose name already appeared in criminal investigations across several states: Ottis Toole. Toole was a drifter with a long criminal record and a history of violent offenses. He often traveled with another notorious serial killer, Henry Lee Lucas, and both men became known for making numerous confessions to crimes, many of which were later proven false or impossible. That reputation immediately created a problem for investigators. If Ottis Toole confessed, could anyone believe him? During questioning, Toole admitted to abducting Adam Walsh. According to investigators, he described picking up a young boy outside the Sears store before driving away, claiming the child became frightened and began crying. From there, his account turned increasingly disturbing. But almost as quickly as he confessed, he changed his story. Days later, he denied everything. Then he confessed again, and then he denied it once more. Each interview seemed to raise as many questions as it answered, which was deeply frustrating to detectives. Some details Toole provided appeared to match information that had never been widely released, while other parts of his story were inconsistent or impossible to verify, causing the investigation to stall once again. Then another setback made things even worse. Evidence collected during the early years of the case had been mishandled. According to later reviews, several important items, including a vehicle believed to be connected to the investigation, were no longer available for modern forensic testing. As years passed, DNA technology transformed criminal investigations around the world. Cold cases that had seemed impossible to solve were suddenly reopened, and families who had waited decades finally received answers. But in the Adam Walsh investigation, many of the key pieces of physical evidence were gone. That meant detectives couldn't simply retest everything using modern science. Instead, they had to reconstruct the case from witness statements, surviving records, and years of investigative work. Despite those challenges, the Hollywood Police Department never stopped reviewing the file. As investigators looked back over thousands of pages of reports, interviews, and evidence, one conclusion kept appearing. Even with the inconsistencies and the missing evidence, they believed the facts pointed directly to Ottis Toole. But there was one final obstacle. By the time investigators were prepared to formally close the case, Toole had already died in prison. Consequently, there would never be a trial, no courtroom testimony, and no jury verdict, only an official conclusion based on decades of investigation. When police finally announced that decision in 2008, it brought relief to some, but for others, it raised one final question. Was justice truly served if no one was ever held accountable in court? For more than 27 years, the Walsh family waited for an official answer. Then, in December 2008, the Hollywood Police Department announced that it was formally closing the investigation. After reviewing decades of evidence, detectives concluded that Ottis Toole had abducted and murdered Adam Walsh. There would be no criminal trial and no guilty verdict delivered in a courtroom, as Toole had died in prison years earlier. The case was officially closed, but for many people it never truly ended. Some investigators believed the evidence supported the conclusion, while others questioned whether the missing physical evidence meant certain questions would never be answered. Even today, discussions about the investigation continue, but one fact has never been disputed. The disappearance of Adam Walsh permanently changed how America responds when a child goes missing. For John and Reve Walsh, grief could easily have become silence. Instead, they transformed it into action. Determined that no other family should face the same nightmare alone, John Walsh became one of the country's most recognizable advocates for victims of violent crime. In 1988, he began hosting America's Most Wanted, a television program that brought unsolved criminal cases into millions of homes. The show helped authorities capture hundreds of fugitives over the years and encouraged viewers to play an active role in solving crimes. In this way, Adam's name continued to save lives long after his own life had been taken. His legacy reached far beyond television. Retailers across the United States introduced Code Adam, an emergency procedure designed to help locate missing children inside stores within minutes of a report. Law enforcement agencies strengthened cooperation on missing child investigations, national awareness campaigns expanded, and in 2006, the Adam Walsh Child Protection and Safety Act became law, introducing new measures aimed at protecting children and improving the tracking of convicted sex offenders. For many parents, Adam Walsh's story became a painful reminder that tragedy can unfold in the most ordinary places: a routine shopping trip, a few moments out of sight, and a life changed forever. More than 4 decades have passed since that summer afternoon in Hollywood, Florida. Department stores have changed, technology has changed, and the way missing child investigations are handled has changed. Yet one photograph of a smiling 6-year-old boy still reminds millions of people why those changes were necessary. Adam Walsh's life lasted only 6 years, but the impact of his story continues to shape laws, police procedures, and the way parents think about their children's safety. Sometimes history isn't changed by presidents or by wars. Sometimes it's changed by one child whose name the world refused to forget.